My name is Barbara. I'm 26, born and raised in a quiet suburb of Ohio, and I'm the oldest daughter in a family that always seemed to think one child was enough, as long as that child was my younger sister, Michelle. From as early as I can remember, I was the calm one, the reliable one, the grown-up kid. I was the girl who color-coded her school folders, who saved her lunch money instead of buying snacks, who stayed home reading while the other kids were out riding bikes. Michelle, on the other hand, she was a firework in human form. Loud, flashy, impossible to ignore, and apparently impossible not to love. In our home, it always felt like there was one spotlight and it followed Michelle wherever she went. I'd walk into a room and be greeted with a half glance and a distracted, "Hey, sweetie," while Michelle could trip over the dog and suddenly it was a whole family event. "Oh honey, are you okay? Should we call someone?" Mom would rush to her like she'd been shot. Me. I once sprained my wrist in gym class and drove myself to urgent care. No one even noticed I'd left. Michelle got birthday parties with themes and gift bags. I got homemade cakes, sometimes, and usually the leftover decorations from hers. She screamed when she unwrapped the latest iPhone. I smiled quietly when I received a second-hand Kindle. Don't get me wrong, I didn't need much. I was used to being invisible. But it's amazing how even after you accept the shadows, you still ache for just a little sunlight. By high school, the pattern was set in stone. Michelle brought home C's and got rewarded with shopping trips. I brought home straight A's and got a tired, "Well, that's what we expect from you." When I got my first part-time job at 16, my parents were proud. For about 5 minutes. Michelle got a piercing without asking, and Mom drove her to the mall the next day for a new outfit, to help her express herself. So I kept my head down. I studied hard. I didn't make waves. I told myself that college would be my way out, my chance to finally define my worth. I wasn't after some flashy lifestyle, I just wanted independence. A future I could build with my own 2 hands. I started saving early. Every birthday check from a distant aunt, every babysitting dollar, every hour worked at the local bookstore went into a hidden envelope in my dresser drawer. That envelope became my secret pride. It wasn't just money. It was proof that I was capable of doing something for myself, without being handed anything. By the time senior year rolled around, I was applying to schools no one even knew I had dreamed of. I spent late nights researching scholarships, perfecting essays, pouring everything I had into being seen. Not by them but by the world. And it worked. I got into my top choice university with a full ride. I remember running into the kitchen holding that acceptance letter like it was a golden ticket. "Mom, Dad, I got in. Full scholarship." Mom barely looked up from curling Michelle's hair. "That's nice, dear," she said. "Michelle, hold still, you'll mess up your part." Dad didn't even lower his newspaper. That was the moment I realized. Love in my family wasn't something you earned. It was something Michelle was born into. But I didn't let it stop me. I packed my bags and left for college, ready to start a life that was finally mine. I stayed in touch, called occasionally, visited during the holidays. I thought that maybe, just maybe, distance would soften the edges of resentment, help us all appreciate each other more. I had no idea that while I was building my life from scratch, my family was preparing to burn down the one thing that symbolized all my independence. My car, the one thing I'd worked for, cherished, and called mine. But that's another part of the story. College was everything I hoped it would be. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Michelle's sister, or the quiet one. I was just Barbara. Student, scholarship recipient, part-time librarian, future psychology major. I felt seen. I felt real. No one at college cared that I didn't wear designer jeans or spend hours curling my hair. They cared that I was sharp in debate, organized in group projects, and the kind of person you could count on. It was like finally breathing after years of holding my breath. During those early semesters, I worked 2 jobs to cover whatever wasn't included in my scholarship. Books, groceries, transportation. I didn't mind. That envelope of savings I once hid in my drawer had long since been spent on one of my proudest achievements. My car. A used but pristine Toyota Camry I bought from a retired schoolteacher who kept it cleaner than a hospital hallway. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. I had paid for every bolt, every tire, every oil change. To me, that car wasn't just a way to get to class. It was a reward for every time I'd swallowed a slight, ignored a cruel comparison, and kept moving forward. I called my parents the day I brought it home from the used car lot. I bought a car. I said, beaming into the phone still parked in the lot, the keys warm in my palm. My dad chuckled. Well, you always were the practical one, he said. My mom asked if Michelle could borrow it when she visited. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Michelle, meanwhile, was in her second year at a local community college. I used the word "in" loosely because she was more focused on posting TikToks and skipping class than actually earning credits. Still, my parents treated her like she was the one with the bright future. I once overheard my mom on the phone with a friend saying, "Michelle's got that star quality. She just needs the right opportunity." Opportunity? She was practically allergic to effort. But again, I bit my tongue. Let them think what they want, I told myself. I've got my own path and I'm walking it just fine. The distance between me and home kept getting wider, not just in miles but in perspective. I started seeing the patterns more clearly. The way Michelle's tantrums always turned into vacations. The way my sacrifices became expectations. I was the fallback babysitter, the emergency fund, the example they held up to guilt her, but never the one they celebrated. Still, I kept calling on Sundays. I visited during breaks. I brought thoughtful gifts from campus. Sweaters for mom, imported tea for dad, a necklace for Michelle she never wore. I thought maybe the problem wasn't them. Maybe I just needed to try harder. I didn't realize then that love isn't something you should have to prove. One day, on a call during my junior year, Michelle casually mentioned she wanted to study abroad in London. Everyone's doing it, she said. There's this program over winter. Super expensive though. I remember the way mom's voice lit up. Oh sweetie, that would be amazing for you. You'd thrive there. But I'd need a few $1,000s, Michelle pouted. Don't worry, Dad said. We'll figure it out. Maybe sell a few things. You're worth the investment. It stung. Not because Michelle wanted to travel. I wasn't against her having dreams. It was how quickly they jumped to help her chase them, no matter the cost. For me, every step had required justification, sacrifice, planning. For her, it was just a matter of asking. That night, I sat in my car and cried for the first time in months. I didn't even know why at first. It wasn't just about Michelle. It was years of being the afterthought. The backup. The invisible one who never caused trouble and therefore never got attention. But I still had my car. My space. My independence. No one could take that from me. At least that's what I thought. It was a crisp Saturday morning in early October when I decided to come home for the weekend. Unannounced. Not because I wanted to catch anyone off guard. I just missed the feeling of a real kitchen, and maybe, somewhere deep down, I wanted to see if anyone would be happy I showed up. The driveway was more crowded than usual. Michelle's boyfriend's car was parked halfway on the grass, and I saw a brand new suitcase by the garage. As I stepped inside, the smell of fresh waffles hit me, Mom's special treat for important occasions. The kind she hadn't made since Michelle's high school graduation. I stood in the hallway for a second, suitcase still in hand, listening. Mom's voice rang out from the kitchen, cheerful and excited. We're going to need to get you a warmer coat, honey. London's cold in December. Michelle giggled, her usual high-pitched hum of glee. I was looking at some online. There's this white trench from Zara I really want. Dad chimed in. Well, you're practically already there. We just have to get through this week and boom, across the pond you go. I walked into the room, my entrance unnoticed for a beat until Michelle spotted me and shrieked, Barb, you didn't tell us you were coming. She jumped up and gave me a half hug, smelling of vanilla body spray and entitlement. My parents looked surprised. Maybe not thrilled, but surprised. I figured I'd come home for a few days, I said, trying to keep things casual. Midterms are over. Needed a break. Mom nodded and offered me a plate. There's waffle batter left. You can make one. I sat down, still holding my jacket. Something didn't feel right. The kitchen was bright, warm, full of chatter, but it was like I wasn't quite in it. Like I was a guest watching the real family at work. So, I said slowly, London, huh? Big move. Michelle beamed. Winter term study abroad. It's going to be epic. Museums, tea, cute accents. And the program's actually based in Kensington. And expensive, I added, sipping from a chipped mug. Dad cleared his throat. Well, yes. But we've managed to pull the funds together. Made a few sacrifices. That word, sacrifices, landed like a dull thud in my stomach. I stared at him. What kind of sacrifices? There was a beat of silence. Mom avoided my eyes. Michelle suddenly found her phone fascinating. And then Dad, like it was nothing, said, "We sold your car." I blinked. "You what?" "The Camry," he repeated. "It was just sitting there while you're away. And Michelle really needed this chance." My hands went cold. "You sold my car." "It was in the driveway for months," Mom said defensively. "It made more sense for it to go to something important. Something real. Michelle's future." "That car was mine," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice from cracking. "I bought it. With my money. Not yours." "You don't understand," Dad said, annoyed now. "It's not about ownership. It's about family. We make sacrifices for each other." "No," I said. "You make sacrifices for Michelle. I work for things. And then you take them." Michelle chimed in, trying to sound sweet. "Barb, come on. Don't be dramatic. It's not like it was a brand new car. And I'm doing something exciting. Can't you be happy for me?" I stared at her, stunned. "Happy? You think I should be happy that my car, my one piece of independence, got sold so you could play tourist in a city you'll probably get bored of in a week?" Mom stood up, arms crossed. "That's enough, Barbara. We've supported you for years. One car doesn't make you a martyr." But it wasn't about the car anymore. It was the final cut in 1,000 small wounds. I left the kitchen without touching my plate. In my childhood bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the empty driveway. My hands were shaking. That car had been more than metal and wheels. It was proof that I mattered. That I could make something of my own. That I existed beyond being the responsible sibling. And now it was gone. Taken. Without a single word of warning. And the worst part? They didn't even think they owed me an apology. I didn't come out of my room for hours. The house pulsed with laughter downstairs. Michelle's, of course. The kind of high-pitched squeal that always reminded me of the way she used to fake cry as a kid just to get out of chores. I lay on my old twin bed, staring at the ceiling fan slowly circling above me, the walls still plastered with faded posters from my teenage years. I felt 17 again. Small. Overlooked. Powerless. But something inside me had changed. I pulled my backpack closer and dug through the side pocket, retrieving a worn folder I hadn't opened in months. Inside were copies of important documents I kept with me for safekeeping. Birth certificate, scholarship forms, college loan papers, and the car title. I unfolded it with slow, deliberate fingers. There it was in bold black ink. My name. Just mine. Not Mom's. Not Dad's. They had no right. They didn't just cross a line. They stomped on it. I could feel my pulse in my ears as I read it again, as if the paper would change, as if this whole thing was some awful misunderstanding. But it wasn't. The betrayal was real. And for once in my life, I didn't want to be the bigger person. I didn't want to rationalize it, explain it away, or suppress the fire rising in my chest. I was angry. Deeply, profoundly angry. And under that anger was something sharper. Resolve. I slid the folder back into my bag and stood up, walking slowly to the window. The driveway looked strange without my Camry. Almost symbolic. Like they'd erased a part of me without even blinking. I thought about all the nights I'd walked home in the cold just to save gas money. The way I'd checked tire pressure every Sunday, kept a log of every oil change, carefully budgeted for the down payment, and finally handed over a cashier's check to that old schoolteacher who hugged me and said, "You're a smart girl. Take care of her." I had taken care of her. And now she was gone. My eyes wandered to the bookshelf in the corner, still full of books I'd left behind when I moved out. One spine caught my eye. A pale blue hardcover journal from my high school AP Lit class. I pulled it out, dusted it off, and opened to a random page. "You cannot build self-worth out of silence." I remembered writing that. Sophomore year. I had been furious after Michelle told our friends at school that I wet the bed as a kid, which wasn't true, but it got me mocked for weeks. When I told Mom, she said, "Don't be so sensitive. She was just trying to make people laugh." That's when I started writing. Quiet rebellion. I'd pour my feelings into those pages because saying them out loud never made a difference. Till now. A sudden noise snapped me out of the memory, knuckles rapping on my door. "Barb." Michelle's voice, tentative. "Are you still mad?" I didn't answer. She waited a beat, then said, "I just thought maybe we could talk. I didn't know they were gonna sell it without telling you." I stayed silent. She sighed and walked away. Of course she didn't know. Or maybe she did. It didn't matter. She benefited from it. That was always how it worked. Michelle didn't need to ask for favors, they just happened. I sat down at my desk and powered up my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed the words. Can I sue my parents for selling a car I legally own? The search results flooded in. Forums, articles, even a few Reddit threads. And the answer was clear. Yes, I could. It would be complicated, messy, emotional, but possible. I took a breath. Maybe I wasn't ready to burn the house down yet, but I could start gathering the matches. I didn't sleep that night. My thoughts kept spinning like the ceiling fan above me, cycling through everything I wanted to say, scream, demand, but knew I never would, at least not to their faces. Not directly. That wasn't how my family worked. Emotions were things to be brushed under the rug, ignored until they hardened into habits. But this time I wasn't interested in pretending. I was done hiding. I was done playing the role of the understanding daughter. It was time they understood me. By 7 a.m. I had showered, dressed, and packed my bag. Michelle was still asleep, no doubt dreaming about Big Ben and double-decker buses. Mom was on the phone in the kitchen, probably planning a farewell brunch. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out. The law office wasn't far, 30 minutes away, nestled between a florist and an insurance agency. The building was small and plain, the kind of place you'd drive past without a second thought. But inside I met attorney Maria Holt, a no-nonsense woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper tone. She wore a gray suit and a silver wedding band that gleamed when she extended her hand. "You're Barbara," she said. "Have a seat. I read your email this morning. Let's talk." I slid the title across the desk. They sold the car while I was away at college. Without telling me. Without my permission. She studied the paper for a moment, then looked up. "Title's clean. All under your name. If what you're telling me is true, they had no legal right to sell it." I exhaled, slow and measured. "So, what happens now?" "Well," she said, folding her hands, "technically it's theft. Civil, not criminal unless you want to escalate it. But at the very least you're entitled to compensation. Maybe even punitive damages depending on how they handled the sale." "They used the money for my sister's travel program," I said flatly. "London. She leaves next week." Maria raised an eyebrow. "So they liquidated your personal property to fund a luxury trip for someone else. Interesting." "Not someone else," I corrected. "My sister. The golden child." Maria smiled thinly. "Families make things messy. But law is simple. It's just paper, ownership, and intent. And from what I see here, you've got a strong case." For the first time in days I felt something like control settling over me. A sense that I wasn't just drifting in their orbit anymore. I had options. Leverage. A voice. By noon the paperwork was drafted. A formal letter of intent. It outlined the illegal sale, the ownership details, the amount owed, and the legal consequences if they didn't respond within 10 business days. Maria assured me it was just the beginning. A warning shot. We could escalate if needed. I emailed it to myself, then printed 2 copies. One for mailing. One I planned to deliver in person. I drove straight back home, hands trembling on the wheel of the rental car. My stomach flipped as I pulled into the driveway. Mom was out front, watering her hydrangeas. She looked up, startled, then narrowed her eyes. "Barbara, what are you doing back?" I stepped out without answering and handed her the envelope. "Legal notice. You'll want to read it." Her brows furrowed as she took it, fingers twitching. "What is this?" "My car," I said quietly, "was mine. You had no right to sell it. And now there are consequences." Her face turned a shade paler as she read the heading. You're suing us?" "I'm demanding what's mine. That's all." She sputtered, clutching the papers like they were on fire. "Barbara, we're family. You don't do this to family." I met her eyes. "You don't steal from family either." Inside the house I could hear movement. Michelle's footsteps on the stairs, Dad's muffled voice asking what was going on. But I didn't wait for the show. I turned around, walked back to the car and drove off without another word. For years, I had swallowed every slight, every favoritism, every stolen moment of recognition. This time I chose to spit it back out. Let them feel the silence I had lived with my whole life. The call came that evening just as I was settling back into my apartment. I almost didn't answer. But when the screen lit up with Mom, I pressed accept, not out of obligation but because I was ready. Ready to hear whatever guilt trip speech they had prepared. Ready to face it all head-on. Her voice was low, controlled, like she was trying hard not to scream. "Barbara, what the hell is this letter?" "You read it," I replied evenly. "You know what it is. You're suing us?" Her voice cracked, half disbelief, half fury. "Over a used car?" "It wasn't about the car," I said, already exhausted. "It's about the fact that you didn't even think I deserved a conversation before you took something that belonged to me." She scoffed. "We raised you, fed you, paid for your school clothes. And this is how you repay us." I laughed, bitter and hollow. "You didn't pay for my college. You didn't even help with books. Every cent came from scholarships and jobs. But sure, let's pretend this is about waffles and winter coats." Pause. Then a new voice came on the line. "That, Barb, let's be reasonable. You know we didn't mean any harm. We had to make a choice." "You always make a choice," I snapped. "And it's never me." The line went quiet. Then came a third voice. "Michelle. Can we just talk like normal people?" she said, trying for her usual sing-song tone. "I didn't ask them to sell your car." "But you didn't stop them either," I replied. "You knew it wasn't theirs to sell. But it didn't matter, did it? As long as you got what you wanted." "I didn't know until afterward," she said, quieter now. "And yeah, I felt bad. But I thought maybe you'd be okay with it. I mean, it's not like you ever cared about being part of this family anyway." That hit harder than I expected. I'd spent years caring too much, hoping they'd notice, appreciate, acknowledge me. And now the narrative had flipped. Suddenly I was the outsider, the cold one, the threat to their fragile system of favoritism. "You don't get to rewrite the story just because I finally stood up for myself," I said, voice sharp. I cared. I cared enough to keep trying. Even when I was invisible. Even when I should have walked away. There was silence again, then Mom's voice, tired and trembling. "We're asking you, please don't take this public. It would humiliate us. The church, the neighbors, your father's job." "So now you're worried about appearances," I said. "Not what you did. Just how it'll look." "We'll pay you back," Dad said quickly. "We'll figure something out. We'll give you $5,000. And," he hesitated, "we'll put your name on the condo. The one in Florida. We've been talking about retiring there." I almost laughed. "Bribery now?" "It's not bribery," Mom said. "It's a compromise. A family compromise." "No," I said, my voice calm but final. "Compromise is when both sides are respected. This is panic." There was a shuffle. Then Michelle again. "You're really doing this, huh?" "I already did." "Fine," she snapped. "But don't expect anyone to forgive you. You think this makes you strong? It just proves how selfish you've always been." I closed my eyes for a second, breathing deeply. "I was never selfish," I said quietly. "I just stopped giving everything to people who gave nothing back." I ended the call. 10 minutes later I got a flurry of texts from extended family. Aunt Leslie shocked. Uncle Rick disappointed. Cousin Jenna telling me to let it go. "It's just a car, Barb." But none of them had been there all those years. None of them knew what it felt like to be erased so thoroughly by the people who were supposed to see you best. They weren't mad that I was wrong. They were mad that I finally stopped accepting being treated like I didn't matter. And I was done apologizing for that. The courthouse was smaller than I imagined. No grand columns or echoing marble halls. Just beige walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and a slightly peeling seal of the state above the judge's bench. But it might as well have been a cathedral. Because for the first time in my life I was about to be heard. Officially. Publicly. I sat beside Maria Holt, my attorney, calm on the outside but bracing for whatever storm was about to come. Across the room were my parents and Michelle, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mom wore a navy blazer, the one she used for funerals and school board meetings. Dad looked like he hadn't slept in days. Michelle had sunglasses perched on her head indoors, as if this were an inconvenience between brunches. The judge reviewed the documents quietly. Then he looked up, his tone neutral, measured. "So we're here over the unauthorized sale of a vehicle registered solely in Ms. Barbara Green's name. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Maria said. "The defendants, her parents, sold the vehicle without consent or legal authority. They have since refused to compensate Ms. Green or acknowledge wrongdoing. The other lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor, while the technicalities of the sale may have lacked formal consent, the vehicle in question was purchased while Ms. Green was living in her parents' household. They believed in good faith that the car was family property. Is that your defense? The judge asked, eyes narrowing. Good faith belief in ownership? Yes, sir, the man nodded. And we're willing to offer restitution. $5,000 in co-ownership of a property. I'm not interested in partial repayment or handouts, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice didn't shake. This isn't just about money. It's about being treated like I matter. Like my work, my savings, my effort meant something. There was a flicker in the judge's expression. Not sympathy exactly, but understanding. He turned to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Green, were you aware the car title was in your daughter's name? Mom shifted. We didn't check. But we assumed. Assumption is not ownership, the judge cut in. And selling property that doesn't belong to you is not a gray area. It's a violation of civil law. The fact that this happened within a family makes it unfortunate, but not excusable. Michelle rolled her eyes dramatically. I didn't look at her. The judge sighed, then delivered the ruling. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The sale was unlawful. The defendants are ordered to repay the full fair market value of the vehicle at the time of sale, plus an additional $1,000 in damages for emotional distress and breach of trust. Payment is to be made within 30 days. I exhaled slowly. Not relief, something deeper. Release. Outside the courthouse, the wind hit my face like a baptism. Pling. Honest. My parents brushed past me without a word. Mom's jaw was tight. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. Michelle muttered, hope it was worth it. I didn't respond. She wouldn't understand even if I tried to explain. It wasn't about winning. It was about proving that I could stand on my own terms. That my voice mattered, even if it had to echo through a courtroom to be heard. I drove home in silence. No music. Just the sound of tires on pavement and the knowledge that something inside me had shifted forever. Not broken, clarified. That night, I sat in my small apartment, sipping tea and staring out the window. No calls came. No apologies. But I didn't need them. I looked around at the life I had built. The bookshelves I put together myself, the second-hand desk I refinished one summer, the framed acceptance letter on the wall. It wasn't much. But it was mine. All of it. Earned. Protected. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a background character in someone else's story. I was the author now. 3 weeks passed. No messages. No missed calls. No awkward emails or carefully worded apologies. My phone stayed silent except for the usual updates from my bank, my job, and my tiny group of friends who knew enough not to ask too many questions. It was both peaceful and sad in that way only estrangement can be. A quiet you earn after years of noise you were never invited to make. I spent most evenings alone now, but not lonely. There's a difference, and I was learning to feel it. I rearranged my furniture. Got new curtains. Bought a set of ceramic bowls I'd been eyeing for months but always convinced myself were too indulgent. I cooked for myself. Real meals, not just microwave noodles or toast over the sink. I lit candles. I read novels I'd never had time for. I reclaimed space I didn't know I had been giving away piece by piece. Some nights, I'd sit by the window with tea and look up at the dark sky, wondering if Michelle was enjoying London. I hoped she was. I didn't hate her. I didn't even resent her anymore. I just saw her clearly now, not as the villain in my life story but as a product of the same system that ignored me. She'd been raised to expect things to come easily. I'd been raised to believe I didn't deserve them unless I bled for them. That wasn't her fault. But it also wasn't my job to carry the cost. One Friday evening, just as the sun dipped below the rooftops, a knock came at my door. I opened it slowly and found my mother standing there. No makeup. Hair pulled back. She held a plain envelope in one hand, her eyes tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Not angry or performative, just human. I brought the check, she said quietly. And the title to your new car. Your father insisted. It's used, but it's clean. I took the envelope, nodding, unsure what to say. She didn't try to come inside. Didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't cry. We'll probably be in Florida by Christmas, she said. Just thought you should know. I nodded again. Thanks. She hesitated. You were right to fight back. That surprised me more than the car. I didn't think I'd ever say that, she added. But I see it now. You wanted to be heard. I wanted to matter, I said. You always did, she said. We just didn't see it until you made us. And then she left. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel relief. I just closed the door and leaned against it, letting the moment settle. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't a clean resolution. But it was enough. Later that night, I sat at my desk and pulled out my old high school journal. The pale blue one I used to fill with quiet rage and buried hopes. I flipped to the last blank page and wrote slowly without rushing. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't being ignored. It's learning to stop seeking validation from those who'll never give it freely. Sometimes peace looks like walking away, not out of anger but out of clarity. And just like that, I knew I didn't need anything else from them. No family dinners. No holiday invitations. No forced smiles or conditional affection. I had my voice. My spine. My story. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I was the one who left the room and never looked back.